Alright, so now for double Helix. So open up your slicer, open up a new window, and if you unzip the files in your downloads, you should see the layout with supports. If nothing else, you can follow along to see how the supports are, how I orient the parts and what I add supports to. If you can't load up the product file, but if you can, it'll make your life a lot easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and load this up. Now this is a lot of build plates. You won't need all of them unless you're printing a full blaster, or a full blaster as well as the other front end. But just a quick overview, these first three are all for the end section of the blaster. Then the next four are for the half-length and elite front end, and the four after that are for the mega front end. So you may only need the first 7 plates, or the first 3 and the last 4 if you're doing mega. But we're going to walk through all of them so you see what needs supports and what doesn't. When it comes to the orange parts, the catch are generally written with extra wall loops and infill, and also need supports on a bunch of the bottom faces there. Now when it comes to the plunger head, that needs a fair bit of support on the bottom, but not a huge amount, and I found the inside prints just fine without any. And the other orange parts will print fine with no supports. When it comes to the secondary colors parts, plate 2 here, the grip wants a fair bit of support on all these overhanging faces. The stock pad and spring brace don't need any, and then the stock accent does need some on the inside on this slot here. And I also like to add some to the sling point, just for the extra consistency for the part. And then you'll also need some back here on the extra dovetail, just to keep the bottom edge there printing correctly, as otherwise it's going to print in midair. Now when it comes to the blue parts for it, we have the stock base, which mostly wants supports on these arches here. It doesn't need to be the full thing, only really this top section is going to be noticeable, but the full thing is just what gets filled in. We also have these other areas for the catch, which are going to need support. This is a section where printing tree supports can be helpful, but printing with normal supports is also fairly easy to remove. And then for the front interface, this is a bit of a weird printer orientation, but the main thing here is keeping the layers perpendicular to the takedown pins, or at least nearly so. And then you can see I've painted a bunch of supports down on the bottom here between the Picatinny rail and under it, and then also filling in the swooshes on the side to make sure those will print flat. If your printer is very good at bridging, you might not need it, but I like adding it so I don't have to worry about it. Then there's these little overhangs at the top, which don't need support, but can help making it consistent and also help a little bit with the fitment, although you can generally clean off those bridges if you need to. Now, starting on the elite front end, elite and half-length front end, we have the rails, both of which need a decent amount of support, just with how the parts are shaped. You could print them differently, but this just is the most straightforward. The muzzle also wants a decent amount of support. Not a whole lot of areas to paint, but a few. Both mag releases will want support on the inside of them, just because this corner can get rounded off and make it a bit harder to use without it. Moving on to the primary color parts for the elite and half-length front end. We have the front of it, which just really wants support for the linear rail spot, as well as in the back here for the alignment pegs to connect the front and back halves, for sections rather. And then for the mag wheel top, we want to fill in basically all of the surfaces perpendicular to build, or parallel to the build plate, but everything else should print just fine. So filling in these sections where the linear rail goes, these spots where the takedown pins rest, and then these spots for the windows into the mag wheel, as well as at the front again for the joining pieces between the two halves. Coming over here, we have all of the secondary color parts. The pump block and joiners don't need any support. The magwells don't really need support, or magwells do need support, mainly in these areas down the side. So right down here, there's a little bit there. And this is just that the sidebars in the front section and rear sections will mesh nicely when putting it together, when putting the two front and back half of the blaster together. And same goes for the Talon magwell. This one also might want some support up here under where the mag release will go, but you can probably print that without support there and do just fine. And then we have the pusher. It might be worth making sure your printer is at least a little bit, or the printing profile you're using is a little bit dialed in for TPU, but printing it a little bit off is alright, and I found will work fairly well, although printing it with a more optimized profile might get better results by some amount. Now for the mega front end, we have all the orange parts. Again, the rails having a fair amount of support. The muzzle needs a little bit of support at the bottom here, but is otherwise fine. And then the mag releases both want that corner supported. Make sure those corners don't get rounded. And the barrel mount here doesn't need any supports on it and should print fine all on its own. Moving over to the primary colored parts, we have the front, which wants support for linear rail, and then the joining area. Same for the magwell top. And again, this wants supports for the magwell windows. Here, using the fill bucket just fills in a very large area, so that's why the side here is green. Really, it just needs to be the flat part up top. And then back here where the takedown pins, it's also painted. If you don't have support here, it's not the end of the world. This just makes it look a little bit better, and you need a bit less cleanup. Moving over to the secondary color parts. The joiner pieces don't need supports, neither does the pump block, but both of the magwells need supports. Again, this is down on the side where both sets of sidebars go, and also around where it interacts with the magwell, with the upper magwell sections. And then we have the mega pusher. Not a skinny pusher in this case, but still works pretty well. And again, you kind of want a dialed-in TPU profile, but it's not something you need to worry about too much when it comes to printing out these parts. Alright, so now that you have all the parts printed, let's get on to building it. Now when it comes to this one, a couple of the screw holes in mine are not quite toleranced, as well as they are on the parts that you will have. So I have things like slightly larger screws and things like that. And the first thing we're going to do is, oddly enough, one of the parts that's going to be toleranced a bit differently. So we're going to take the shorter section of carbon fiber tube, we're going to set that into the stock base. Doesn't really matter which direction you're doing it, but that should press in pretty smoothly. And you'll see there's a ridge on the inside that will hit up against. It goes all the way in, and it should fill in that window. This little nick there. That little nick there is just from trying to get it out a couple of times. But now that we have that installed, we'll grab our catch, the one bolt, and one of the M3 nuts. And we're going to put that in. So the catch will just go in the gap like so. M3 nut on one side, and the bolt screwing in from the other. Here you want to make sure you're just not tighten it so much that the catch has trouble moving or anything like that, as the catch can slice to have a couple of extra layers on one side or the other, which can be a little bit funky. But tightening that down goes a little bit past flush. You can see that's moving pretty freely. Next thing we're going to do is grab the stock accent, one of the nuts, and one of our bevel-headed screws. We'll just go and hold it back, and we want to make sure that that is laying flat down in there before we go and do anything else. There we go. And on yours, that'll be more of a press fit. On mine, it's a bit loose. Then we'll slide that in and tighten the screw from the other side. Again, because mine is a bit loose, I'm not going to flip it over. But I'm just going to tighten in one screw. And I'll hold it on pretty nicely. You just tighten that down until it doesn't really want to go any further, and you'll be good. And we got no rattle, so it means we were able to get the thread, despite it being a little loose. Now we're going to put in the carbon fiber bars and the catch O-ring. So on the end with the two holes, we're going to put them in the other. We're going to take the end with two holes, put the O-ring. Well, take the end with two holes, and that's going to be the one that we're going to put in. First, you want to start the O-ring, hold it in there, put the O-ring so it holds in there, and then the bar should go in and slide in nice and easily, and let's line up the second hole that shows up with the hole in the stock base. Something like that. And you can just use a screwdriver or whatever to nudge it back the other direction. And we can go ahead and put one of our screws in there. Nice little spot for the nut to go. Just hold that in, flip it over, and tighten that down. Now we're going to do kind of the same thing on the other side, but because we already have the O-ring in place, we'll take the bar, put it through there, and kind of pull the O-ring across so it lays in a little gap there, and then slide it back, line it up like so, and then go ahead and put our screw in. Like so. Alright. Next thing we do is grab the spring spacer, which is just going to rest right in the back like that, as well as the stock pad itself. Put one M3 nut in either side. Just press them in so that they're fully seated. Something like that. And that will just go on the end there. Whoop. And our M3 nuts hopped out. On yours, that shouldn't be an issue. But if it is, just take the stock back off and give it a second try. Alright, much better that time. Now we'll put one of our screws in each side. This is just the length that you have 10 of. Let's go ahead and tighten that all the way down. Do the same thing on the other side. Catch should be moving freely, springing back and forth, and then stopping on the lip of the tube there. And then your spring brace should be pretty centered and secure. Now, got that all put together. One thing we can do here is take the main tube, and I like to put just dabs of super lube in here, and then that'll be the front. So when the plunger head goes in, it'll move it. It'll move that all around and lube it nicely. Then lube the inside of the tube pretty evenly. But for now, just take the tube and lay it in there like that. It'll press into the stock base a little bit. Stop. Now you can take the bar filler and slide that back up until it hits that piece, like so. Now we're going to do the grip and all of that. Let's grab the grip and the brace. There'll be one nut that goes in the front there. I'm going to do that one first. Again, mine's a bit loose, so flip it over, and that'll just slide right in. And you'll take your longer screw. Hopefully that's still laying flat enough. I'll take our longer screw and just tighten that in. And it'll go about flush with the larger surface here. Whoop. In my case, that nut is wiggled around a little bit and is just not quite lined up. Definitely not lined up. So we'll back it out and give that another go. This time without flipping it over. Even though that is worse for the camera. Put that in there. So. Like so. And tighten it down. Feels like this time it's actually threading in. And yeah, there we go. As you can see, it's about flush there. Next thing we'll do is put the trigger in. This will get the one spring, the one small spring. We'll go in the back there. And then I find you usually need to take a screwdriver and bend that spring down and in there. Just poke it down and it has a little spot in there that it should end up in without too much hassle. Like so. And in a second here it'll have the tube, so the plunger tube to stop it from doing that. Next thing we'll do is put a nut in each of these spots on the grip. Again, for yours these should be snug enough to hold. In my case, they're generally slightly loose. So just take that and slide it in. In my case, I'm going to, when the trigger reaches the bar filler, just like pull the bar filler out a little bit, and then you should be able to get the trigger into it and then slide it all the way back. I'll show you more of what that looks like in a second. Oh, there you go. So the trigger will end up going through the bar filler, and then there will be this nice gap where the trigger and catch will interact. But before we slide all the way in, we'll put the last nut in there, slide it together, as you can see. Then butting up against each other, and then again, because that last one, the one in the back here is a bit loose, we're not gonna flip it all the way over. And just tighten it down. like so. And then we're going to take the front interface, and that should just slide on, well, the front, over the two bars, and just press right up there. And the front of the tube should be just about flush with the end of the rail there. And then we'll take the last 4 screws and put them in each of the holes on the interface. Again, older version, so not all of mine will line up as nicely as they will on yours, but they'll still go pretty well. And if you find you're having trouble with getting those nuts to line up, I find that putting just a small dot of super glue to hold them in place as they go in or as you put the grip in, can do a lot for it. It doesn't need to be a lot, and if you ever need to take it apart, that super glue is not going to hold anything else together, so it'll still come apart very easily if you need it to. Get these last 2 to bite. We have technology. There we go. Much better. And the trigger should move freely. It should be rotating and all that. And then you can take our springs and put them down there. If you're using one of the setups with K31 in it, that can just take a little bit to make sure you get it lined up just right. Now for the plunger head, it's literally just press fitting those 2 pieces together and then putting the O-ring on. In my case, getting lube all over your hands because, well, it's been assembled a couple of times before. And then the springs should rest nicely in there. And it should slide back in. And there you go. So that's the end section assembled. And then in a second here, we'll move on to the first front section. Also, if you're seeing the extra O-ring collet here and wondering, oh man, I didn't print one of those, you're all good. You only need the 2. That extra one is just for the scar barrel, which will be released at some point. But now let's get right into it. So we're going to grab these 2 front sections. In my case, one of the nuts in here is still stuck in there because it went in nicely, and it's staying there. So we're going to leave it. But the 2 front sections and the 2 the 2 joiners. The joiner will slide onto the back, which should be a nice friction fit. If you're finding these are having a hard time fitting, I'd recommend just sizing up the joiners a little bit in your slicer. You can also probably shave down the parts, as if they're printed on large angled face, then some elephant's foot can get in there and make it a little bit tricky. But pretty simply, I'll just slide together like that. Next, we'll take, we're going to grab our linear rail. It'll sit nicely right in there. And then we can flip it over. And we're going to put a screw in this front spot. Take one of your 2 longer screws as opposed to one of your 2 longer bolts. And then the front rail, which only has like a little lip at the front instead of the longer section. We're going to put that there. This one screw is going to go through it. And on the other side, on just inside the front, you can see there's a little nook there. And we're going to put one of the M3 nuts right in there. I'm just going to hold that in with my pointer finger and then screw this in. Just and you just tighten that down as far as it will in my case, that M3 nut is a bit too loose in there to tighten it down much. But on yours, that should not be the case. I'll put the back rail section on. This one has a little dovetail, so we'll need to slide it in from the back. Just line it up and press it in. And there you go. We're going to put this rear screw in first. It's grabbing our other long screw. That's going to go in from the top. One of the M3 nuts will just sit nicely down there at the back. Just using the screwdriver there to make sure it's resting flat as opposed to an off angle. But once it's in there, we can tighten it down nice and simply. Next, we're going to do these other couple of screws in the middle. So there's going to be our shorter screws and these heat set inserts. So I'll grab that one, drop it in, and then put the insert from the other side. And there's generally enough grip between your finger and the insert that you can just tighten it down like that. You can tighten those down a little bit. I wouldn't make them too tight, but I don't believe it makes a huge difference at the end. So we'll then take, we'll then rinse and repeat for the other two, dropping them through, well, first the pick rail and then the linear rail, flipping it over, putting the heat set in, holding the heat set in, and tightening it down. In my case, the two have not quite lined up, so I'm going to back it out. So I just backed out the screw, and then I'm getting another go. I think the threading on the heat set insert here is a bit out of whack, one way or another. So I'm going to flip it over and then try it the other way. Seems alright, although alright. So because we're having an issue here, I'm going to take I try and use my fingers to keep it from rotating a little bit. This one seems to just be all sorts of issues. We'll try the other side of it again. Let's see how that does. Alright, so what I'm going to do is grab this other Allen key and wedge it in there, and then try and use the resistance from that to actually thread into the insert. In your case, you can probably use another screwdriver. You just need to be able to wedge it in there next to the insert to keep it from going round and round in circles. And that's done the trick. So I'll do the other one in the back here. Tighten that down. And that's our rail all installed. Next up, we're going to put in our pump grip. So we're going to take these 4 bolts.
And they should just push in. They might need to thread them through this piece, depending on the print tolerances. And in my case, most of them push through, except for this one. So we're just going to thread that through. One thing I forgot to mention is for the linear rail, if yours is sticking a little bit, it might be worth putting some lube just in the two valleys on either side, and then running the carriage back and forth on it. And I'll get it moving nice and smoothly. Alright, and then we're just going to get one of these to be sticking out from the top, and then you can line that up on the carriage, tighten that one down, and then go around to the others and tighten them down as well. And because these are metal on metal threads, you can basically tighten them as much as you'd like. I imagine with a powerful enough screwdriver that could cause problems, but if you're doing it by hand, you can just go as tight as you can get. At this point, make sure it slides pretty smoothly back and forth. It's okay if it's a little bit sticky at the back end of the travel. It won't really be reaching the full end of that anyways. Or the full extent of that anyways. So now we're going to take our two sidebars, and the end that is a little bit longer, we're going to put to the front. I'm just going to put in the back, slide through, press them into the block. In my case they're a little bit snug, in your case they should be a bit looser. And once you have the two holes lined up, then you can take a nut, and there should be a nook on the inside for nut, and then the screw will just tighten from the outside. If the tolerance is on yours, this should be a bit easier, but whoop. I'm just going to try and press that in a little bit more and start threading it in. There we go. And you can just tighten that one down as far as it'll go, and that should be just fine. And same goes for the other side. Slide it in, move back, line it up with pump grip. To line it up with the pump grip, you might, or with the pump block rather, you might need to move it more forward, and then wiggle the bar back and forth a little bit to get it to line up. That's pretty much normal, and once you start using it, it'll wear in and move nice and smoothly, regardless of whether they line up on their own or need a little bit of coaxing. But again, bringing the nut in through the back, do its nook in the middle, and then tightening down the screw. Now, if you wanted to, you could also put these bars into the pump block before putting it on there. And in that case, you'd put the pump block on and then put the magwell top section on. Or you could also put the front section on first. My preference in that case would be to do the front first, because otherwise the linear carriage could fly off. Because if you do the front first, the linear carriage can only go off one end, whereas if you do the magwell first, there's nothing holding the rail in, so it could come off in either direction. But we now have those all connected. Before we go and put the pusher on there, we're going to assemble the little barrel mounts. So we just grab it, squeeze the O-ring a little bit to get it in, you can press it in there. There's a groove that it'll all lay into. Just press it around, and it'll go in there pretty easily. In my case, I have two of the 15mm collets, just for barrels that I have, but you can also do the 16mm. if you'd like to use something a bit different, or something more standard. One of those will thread in nicely in the back here, and the other will thread into the front muzzle, which I'm going to be installing in a moment. Also, if you're having trouble winding up the thread on either of these, then you can wait and put them onto the barrel and then thread them in, using the barrel as kind of a guide, if you need to. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the two sidebars, and the end with two holes in it is going to go to the front. We're going to put those in, slide them forward around the prime block. Make sure to line them up in the front. If you're using a lot of force on to get them in, that means your prints probably have a little bit of flashing or something. That's making it a bit trickier. In my case, just toleranced a little bit off, but yours should slide in relatively easily. I'll go ahead and slide in the other side before we go and tighten those down. Doesn't make a huge difference. There we go. I guess I'm just using the screwdriver to try and get that hole lined up a bit more. Like so. Now we got the one. Like I said, I already have an M3 nut on the one side that's a bit stuck. So I'll put in the other side, which slides in nice and easily. I'll go ahead and put those screws in. For yours, the screws should go in a little bit past flush. For mine, they aren't, or at least the one certainly isn't. This one feels like it's going to do just fine, but that's just from old tolerances, and also from these bars being made without some of the tools that the ones for your blasters will be made with. But now that one's flush, so we're all good there. Then we'll put the muzzle on. This gets an M3 nut each side, and then we'll just slide onto the front, like so. And go ahead and put your screws in. In my case, it's a little bit off, so I'm going to use the screwdriver to get those through, like so. And we'll go ahead and do this. There we go. Now, flip this around. So we're going to put, we're going to put the magwell in and then do the pusher. Doesn't make a huge difference which order, but makes a little bit. So here I have the town magwell. The same assembly applies to the full-length magwell, pretty much. The only differences are the shape of the parts, really. So the spring is going to go into a little notch in there, and then there's a spot for the spring at the top of the mag release area. Here it looks like it's easier to put the spring in, and the mag release goes in at an angle, and they rotate it back. And the hole in it should line up there. We can go and put the bolt in. You probably don't need to use your extra hand to hold it. In my case, I'm doing that. The spring will be under a little bit of tension, but not be compressed a little bit, but not a huge amount. Pop that side in. And tighten it down. There we go. You can see that moves pretty well. And we'll take 2 rendering nuts, and we'll just go in the top spots at the top front. Like so. And then should be able to slide it on. And the front of the magwell piece will be flush with the front, with the surface and the magwell area. And see we have the flat blue area and the flat black one. Those should be flush, or the equivalents should be flush in yours. And we'll go ahead and put screws in. And these will tighten a good bit past flush. Or screw in a good bit past flush. Just kind of like that. So, other side, a bit wacky. But as you can tell, if any of the screw holes and the bars are off a little bit, you can generally take a screwdriver and an electric screwdriver and get them sorted pretty well. So you have the pusher. You just take the O-ring, put it in there. Again, TPU pusher. It won't work out of plastic or out of PLA as far as I'm aware, because this end of this is what's sealing with the blaster. So then an M3 nut goes down on the front on either side. And I'm just going to push those in, make sure they're fully seated. You can go ahead, put the pusher on there, like so. These ones actually did line up. We'll take our last 2 screws and screw them in from the outside. Like so. And like so. And we'll take our barrel. You can just push that in through the front. Line up, make sure it goes through the pump block correctly. And then it should push into the second holder. Let's open that up. And there we go. Just like that. And if you're doing the Elite version, you're all good. You just take the 2 sections and then slide together and take your 2 takedown pins and put them in. Like so. And now last up we have the Mega front end. You can also do this as Mega half turrets using moose mags, but in this case I'm going to do the full length version, as the half length version I have is not quite right. The half length version I have printed is not quite right. The file you'll have access to is perfectly fine. But I'm going to start by assembling just the magwell here. Need the mag release, the spring, the longer bolt, and one of the M3 nuts. Similar process to the last one. Spring drops in there, mag release goes in after it. In this case, the M3 nut goes in through the back as opposed to the opposite side from the bolt. And the bolt will go through this side, just like so. And there we go. And then we'll take 2 more of the nuts, and they should just go in front nice and easily. And for the half-length magwell, the assembly is virtually the same, just slightly different shapes of parts. So I'll set that off to the side for now. Next bit of assembly we'll do is the main carriage area. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and put the pump block on here and do the screws in that first, and then we'll do the carriage. So I'll take the end with the hole that the hole's further from, push that in, line it up. And in this case we're going to take the pair of shorter screws and put one in from each side. And these will just tighten through. It should be nice and secure in there. The version you have access to should also allow you to use NM3 nut in the back here, and that will be provided. But the version that I have will not fit with that at the moment. So take the other side, press it in, line it up, and tighten the screw. It's always a little bit easier to start it with the electric one sometimes. So do that. And go ahead and tighten it all the way down. Like so. And we'll take our rail. Alright, so now we're going to take these 4 short screws and use them to attach the pump block. So those are going to end up coming out the bottom here. We're just going to put them in. Do our best to put them in. And they'll end up like something like that for the moment. Now, I have spindly fingers, which makes this loads easier. But if you don't, I imagine this is great use for a pair of pliers or a pair of tweezers, maybe. There we go. All of them like that. And we still have the holes in the top to tighten them down. So you can go line them up. So you should be able to line them up and tighten them down nice and easily. Whoop. And if you're wondering why using the short screws here, the answer is because there's not really another way to fit a mega-sized barrel into the system. Because the bolts would be far too close together for the rail to go through there. But now we have those tightened down, so they're all good. And then we're going to grab our front rail here, the front part here, slide it on, as well as our front rail, one with less lip to it. Grab a longer screw and one of the nuts, and then the nut will go on the inside there, and the screw will go in through the top, through the rail. Like so. And you can just go and tighten that down. I'm going to loosen that a little bit so that we can get the other 2 screws in there a bit easier. That's going to be our 2 heat set inserts, 2 more of our screws. Insert goes in there. Making sure it's actually oriented vertically first. Oriented that way, as opposed to on its side. Just hold that in with my pointer finger. And then hopefully thread it in. Oh. Apparently keyword hopefully. Thread that in pretty simply. Like so. And do be careful when you're doing this, because the linear rail can just go off the end at the moment. If you have the rubber stoppers on yours, then you can have one at the other end, one at the end there, and that should keep the rail on there all on its own. There we go. Now both those are nice and tight. You can grab the joiner pieces. Knock one of the Allen keys on the floor. Grab one of the joiner pieces. Slide it on like so. Grab the other one. Slide it on the other side. And we'll take the back section. Line up the 2 priming bars. Get them started. And then it should slide together pretty easily. And make sure to line up those parts. And force them together. It should look something like that. Next thing we're going to do is finish up the rail, as that'll hold it all together a bit nicely. A little bit nicer. Last heat set insert and another screw. We're going to go through there. And tighten down just like the other 2 have. I'll take one of our screws. In your kit, this will be a slightly longer screw. And one of the nuts, and that'll go right up in there and tighten down. I have a long length screw there at the moment, but it'll be about the same length as the one put in up there. So I'll take the screw and whoop. Magnets are fun. Put the nut in there, make sure it's lying flat. Hold it in so it won't come out. And then thread in our last screw there. In this case I just need to pull it back a little bit. The screws going through the linear rail, if you tighten those down enough, can offset this a little bit forward or a little bit backward from where it's supposed to be. So doing more than one of those before you tighten them all the way down can be a bit of help. But now we have all of those installed. Next we'll go ahead and do the pusher. Grab 2 of those, 2 of those. Nuts will just go in the bottom here. Whoop. Before we put the nuts in, I'm going to put the O-ring on. Just like that. Nice and simple. Then put the nut in there. It can be a little bit easier to line up with a screwdriver. Whoop. Like so. And then just push it through. And do the same on the other side. And up the screwdriver. Push it through. And we are all good there. And all good there. Then I can put that in. Line up the 2 holes. One on either side. Well, one on either side. And then you can just tighten it down. again, I have another nut that's stuck in the front there. So we put one down each side, and then one in the front. Put one in the front. We're going to put the muzzle on, which takes the other bolt. Just go on there, nice and easy, just like that. Mine has the kind of venting hole aesthetic from some of the holes being handled odd by the slicer. Yours should print out a bit more normally. And as you saw there, the spot there is a little bit loose, so I won't be able to tighten that down all the way. But on yours it should tighten down with no issues. The other thing that we're going to do is take the barrel mount, put O-ring in the front, just like a giant version of the other ones. That'll go nicely in there. And then the other one will go underneath it, just like so, and then like so. In a second here we'll put our barrel through, but first we're going to put in our sidebars. The two holes go to the front, or the one hole goes to the very front, and the other one more towards the back. But slide those in, line them up, put a screw through, and do the same on the other side. Put one hole to the very front, one just towards the back. Line it up, push down. And put a screw through. Like so. And now this last piece, we're going to slide this back. And this will go in with one bar on either side. And slide on like so. And now we can take our last two screws, one either side. Then put our barrel in, and we'll be good. It'll be good to go. I'm playing Mega Darts. The barrel should just slide in. Whoop. We're gonna unscrew that so we can make sure it rests nicely. Slide that on. Slide the O-ring on after it. Put it through. And then I also have the Mega Scar here, which I'll put on the end, like so. And that there is all the double helix build stuff. So let me know if you have any questions, put them in the comments, I'll do my best to answer them. And if you're looking for more build support, then feel free to join the Discord server, assuming that the link is around.